Most men assume attention-seeking behavior means a woman is being needy. They're wrong. And that single misinterpretation, that quiet, nearly invisible error in perception, is costing them the very connection they claim to want. Here's the truth. When a woman hasn't experienced intimacy in a long time, and I'm not just talking about physical intimacy, but emotional intimacy, being genuinely understood, genuinely seen, she doesn't become less expressive. She becomes more refined. Her signals grow softer on the surface and stronger underneath. And if you don't know how to listen beneath the surface, you'll look at her behavior and label it clingy, confusing, or overwhelming. But a small number of men understand what's really happening in those moments. And those men don't just get her attention, they earn her trust. They become the one she keeps returning to, not because of tactics, not because of clever lines, but because they grasped something most men never take the time to learn. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share doesn't come from a dating coach's opinion or a recycled list of tips you've heard 100 times before. This comes from behavioral psychology, attachment science, and an honest examination of what unfolds inside a woman's emotional world when she's been running on empty for too long. And somewhere in the middle of this, I'm going to show you the one thing she's unconsciously testing for, without even realizing she's testing it all. And why getting that one thing wrong is the silent reason so many promising connections slowly collapse before they ever fully begin. Let me be clear about what this is and what it isn't. This is not about manipulation. It's not about games. It's not about positioning yourself strategically to exploit someone's vulnerability. If that's what you're looking for, this won't serve you. And the truth is, those approaches never work long-term anyway. What this is about is understanding, real understanding, the kind where you walk away able to observe a woman's behavior and decode it, not as something being done to you, but as something being communicated through her because she doesn't yet feel safe enough to say it directly. Because here's the psychological reality. A woman who hasn't experienced genuine intimacy, emotionally, physically, or both, for an extended period goes through a specific internal shift. Her nervous system recalibrates. Her attachment system moves into a quiet, heightened awareness. And her behavior, the subtle ways she acts around men she's drawn to, becomes a precise, often unconscious language. Understanding that language doesn't make you manipulative. It makes you perceptive. And in the world of human connection, perception is the real skill. By the end of this, you'll understand 3 psychological triggers, 3 deep, consistent behavioral patterns that emerge from this emotional state. You'll know what they mean, why they happen, and how your response either builds something real or quietly destroys it before it has the chance to become anything at all. Now let's talk about what most men get wrong, because the mistake isn't loud, it's not some obvious dramatic failure, it's subtle, and that's exactly why it's so costly. When a woman who has been emotionally or physically deprived of intimacy starts behaving differently around a man she feels drawn to, most men respond in one of 2 ways. The first response? They overcorrect. They get excited. They interpret her signals as green lights and accelerate, more texting, more pursuit, more intensity, and without realizing it, they've applied pressure to a system that was only just beginning to feel safe. She pulls back. He doesn't understand why. The momentum that felt like it was building suddenly disappears. He replays conversations in his head, searching for the wrong sentence, the wrong word, but he didn't say the wrong thing. He simply moved too fast into a space she hadn't yet invited him fully into. The second response is the opposite. He notices her behavior, the subtle testing, the slight shifts in proximity, the small intentional gestures, and he misreads them as desperation or games, so he withdraws, to seem less interested, to protect himself, to avoid looking too eager. But what she was actually doing, carefully reaching out to see if he was emotionally safe, gets met with distance. She interprets that distance as disinterest, and she closes the door. Both reactions stem from the same core mistake, responding to what her behavior looks like instead of what it means. You're reading a language you were never taught, and you're reacting to the punctuation while completely missing the sentence. The deeper issue is this. Most advice out there tells men to focus on performance. Say this, do that, create this impression. And performance might spark initial attention, but it can't sustain connection. Because what a woman in this emotional state is truly scanning for isn't performance, it's presence. She's asking herself, is he real? Is he steady? Can he hold the full weight of who I am without flinching? Performance answers none of those questions. In fact, it creates new doubts. So before we move into the three triggers, understand the foundation of everything that follows. This isn't about doing something to her. It's about being something her nervous system recognizes as both safe and magnetic at the same time. That combination, safety and magnetism, is rare. And it's exactly what she's been waiting for. Three psychological triggers. Trigger 1, the presence test. She's not seeking attention, she's testing attunement. Here's what you need to understand first. When a woman who has been emotionally withdrawn or disconnected from intimacy begins seeking your attention, she isn't doing it for validation. She's assessing you. Psychologists refer to this as attunement, the ability to sense another person's emotional state and respond in a way that feels accurate and aligned. For many women, attunement is one of the earliest tests a man either passes or fails, usually without ever realizing he was being tested. What this looks like in behavior is subtle. She might make a comment that carries more beneath it than on top, a light joke with a deeper edge, a casual mention of something she's been through, dropped into conversation as if it's insignificant. And then she waits, not consciously. She's not thinking, let me see if he catches that. It's instinctual. Her system is scanning. Does he hear what I'm not saying? Most men respond to the surface. They laugh at the joke and move on. They answer the comment literally. They never follow the thread to where it actually leads, and she registers that. Not with resentment, not with judgment, just with information. He's present, but not perceptive. Safe enough, but not the one. The men who pass this test don't perform. They notice. They sit with her words a fraction longer than most would. They ask the question that goes one layer deeper, not interrogating, just curious. When you say that, what do you mean by it? Or sometimes it's even quieter than that. Sustained eye contact that communicates, I heard more than the sentence. Here's why this matters so much. A woman who hasn't felt genuinely connected in a long time has usually built a very effective emotional wall, not because she's broken, not because she's difficult, because she's learned. She's learned that vulnerability is risk. She's learned that most people hear without truly listening. So she tests in layers. She offers a small piece and watches what you do with it. If you handle that piece with care, another layer opens, then another. If you miss it, the wall quietly rebuilds. She'll tell herself, it's okay, it just wasn't meant to be. And she'll believe it. Because from her perspective, she handed you the key, and you didn't recognize what it was. The practical takeaway is simple. Slow down. In conversation, resist the urge to fill every silence or pivot the focus back to yourself. Let her words settle. Respond to what's underneath, not just what's spoken. That's what presence actually looks like. Not intensity, not constant engagement, accurate perception, in real time. That's what she's searching for, and almost no one gives it to her. Trigger 2, the proximity pattern. Her body registers before her mind decides. The second trigger is physical, but not in the way you might assume. When a woman who's been emotionally deprived of intimacy begins feeling drawn to someone, one of the earliest signs, if you know how to notice it, is a subtle adjustment in her physical behavior. She starts managing proximity. She finds reasons to be near you. She creates small openings for contact that feel accidental, but aren't. She touches your arm while making a point. She leans slightly across you instead of around you. She consistently positions herself within your physical space, close enough to feel the pull, far enough to preserve plausible deniability. This isn't manipulation, it's biology. Here's the psychological foundation beneath it. Human beings operate with what researchers often describe as a personal space boundary, a comfort radius around the body that we selectively allow others to enter. What's fascinating is that this boundary isn't only about safety, it's also about desire. When we're attracted to someone, we unconsciously begin shrinking that boundary. We allow them closer, and then we observe what they do with that access. For a woman who's been emotionally or physically disconnected from intimacy for a significant period of time, that boundary has often become heavily guarded. She's grown accustomed to keeping people at a managed distance. So the moment she allows that space to narrow around you, even in subtle, deniable ways, it's not small, it's significant. But this is where most men misstep. They notice the proximity and interpret it as a green light to escalate. They move further into the space she created. They match her nearness with forward physical momentum. And sometimes that works, but more often it collapses the very tension that was creating the attraction. Desire lives in the space between two people, not in the elimination of it. What she's actually looking for when she manages proximity is a very specific response: warmth without urgency. She wants to feel your awareness of her presence without feeling pressure from it. She wants to know you notice, that you're not oblivious, that you're not treating her like background furniture. But she also wants to feel that you're not lunging into the moment with hunger she hasn't explicitly invited. The man who can hold that space calmly creates something powerful in her nervous system. Safety with electricity. She feels both drawn and relaxed at the same time. That combination is rare, especially for women who've been emotionally or physically disconnected for a long time, because what they've often experienced is a binary: men who feel safe but create no spark, or men who create spark but feel fundamentally unsafe. The man who can embody both simultaneously becomes deeply compelling, not because of a technique, but because of who he is in that moment. So when you notice the proximity pattern, when she's finding subtle ways to be near you, creating those small, accidental points of contact, the move is not escalation. The move is acknowledgement without amplification. Let her know you see her. Let her feel your warmth, but stay rooted in yourself. Don't rush the invitation. Let the space between you do its work. That space isn't emptiness, it's potential, and she can feel the difference. Trigger 3, the emotional risk signal. This is what she's truly asking. Now we arrive at the third trigger, and this is the one that separates the men who understand this on a surface level from the men who genuinely get it. When a woman who has been disconnected from intimacy for a long time finally begins allowing herself to feel something for someone, there will come a moment, often unexpectedly, where she says or does something vulnerable, something that costs her emotionally to share. It rarely announces itself as vulnerability. It doesn't come wrapped in dramatic language. It might sound like a story about her past, a quiet confession about something she fears, a subtle admission that slips out, followed almost immediately by an attempt to minimize it. Anyway, it's not a big deal. Sorry, I don't even know why I'm telling you this. Pay very close attention in those moments, because what she has just done is offer you an emotional risk. She stepped beyond her protected boundary and handed you something real. And in that exact moment, consciously or not, she's asking one question: are you safe with the parts of me that are hard to carry? This is the test that matters most. This is the one that determines everything. And here's how most men fail it, usually with good intentions. They respond with logic. They try to solve the issue she described. They offer perspective. They reframe it. They reassure in a way that reduces the emotional weight of what she shared. You shouldn't feel that way. That wasn't your fault. You're better than that anyway. Or they reflexively mirror vulnerability back to create instant bonding. That's crazy. Something similar happened to me. And suddenly, the conversation shifts toward them. Neither reaction is inherently wrong, but in this specific moment, both communicate the same underlying message. I'm not fully comfortable sitting with the weight of what you just gave me. And she feels that. Not as criticism, not as anger, just as information. He's kind, but he can't hold this. And slowly, quietly, she rebuilds the wall. The response that changes everything is both simpler and more difficult than most men expect. You don't fix it. You don't immediately share your own story. You don't rush to make it lighter. You hold it. You let her words land fully. You allow a brief silence without scrambling to fill it. And when you do respond, you reflect with care, not analysis, not advice, recognition. That sounds like it really stayed with you. I can understand why that would be hard to carry. Thank you for trusting me with that. That's it. That's the whole shift. And I know it sounds small, almost too simple to matter this much. But decades of research in emotional attunement, attachment theory, and therapeutic communication consistently show this. When vulnerability is met with recognition instead of correction, the bond that forms is fundamentally different. Attachment researchers describe it as a secure base experience, the feeling that this person is someone I can be fully myself around without being managed, fixed, or diminished. For a woman who has been emotionally starved for a long time, that experience is electric because it's what's been missing. No amount of surface level chemistry can replace it. And the man who gives her that, even once, becomes categorically different in her mind from the others. He becomes the one who actually sees me. And once a woman feels genuinely seen, not impressed, not strategically pursued, not performed for, but seen, her attraction shifts. It's no longer cautious. It's no longer tentative. It becomes something she wants to protect. That's the shift you're after. Not manufactured, not rehearsed. Earned through the rarely taught skill of receiving vulnerability with grounded recognition. Now let's bring this out of theory and into the real world. You're talking with her. You've noticed the signs. She's running the attunement test. She's managing proximity. You sense she's been through a stretch of emotional isolation. Here's what you do and what you don't. You don't perform. The moment she senses you stepping into a role, the hyper-supportive guy, the emotionally polished man, the one who gets it, it will feel hollow. Women who've been emotionally disconnected for extended periods develop heightened sensitivity to inauthenticity. Their internal calibration sharpens out of necessity. What you do instead is stay genuinely curious. Curiosity isn't a tactic, it's a state. When you're authentically curious, not gathering data, not looking for leverage, but genuinely interested in her experience, that energy cannot be faked. Ask questions you don't already know the answer to, not interview-style questions, real ones that arise naturally from something she said. You mentioned that earlier. What was that actually like for you? And then listen. Not to reply, not to prepare a story, just to hear. In terms of presence, put the phone away. Not theatrically, not to make a point. Just because she's genuinely more interesting to you than anything on a screen. When she creates proximity, meet it with warmth, not urgency. Smile naturally. Hold eye contact. Not intense, not prolonged beyond comfort. Just real. The kind of eye contact that says, I'm here, I see you, and I'm not in a rush. When she shares something vulnerable, resist the reflex to solve or redirect. Breathe, let it settle, then respond in a way that acknowledges the weight beneath the words. Sometimes the most powerful response is simply, I hear you, said slowly, fully present. And throughout all of this, stay grounded in yourself, not distant, not guarded. Grounded. There's a difference. Grounded means your sense of self isn't dependent on how she's responding moment to moment. You're not scanning for approval. You're not constantly adjusting yourself to manage her energy. You're steady, and steadiness is magnetic in a way very few qualities are, especially for someone who's been in emotional environments that lacked it. She doesn't need perfection. She doesn't need flawless words. She needs to feel that you're present, curious, and capable of holding all of her without flinching. That's it. That's the whole dynamic. If this resonates, not because it sounds clever, but because somewhere in it you recognize something true, then you're already ahead of where most men are. Understanding this isn't a one-video transformation. It's a gradual recalibration, a shift in how you show up, not just romantically, but everywhere. Because attunement, emotional safety, and the ability to hold vulnerability without trying to manage it, these aren't tactics. They're human skills. And developing them changes every relationship in your life. If you want to go deeper into the psychology of attraction, desire, and connection from a place grounded in real understanding, continue exploring this work. Not for numbers, not for performance. But because emotional intelligence is one of the most valuable investments a man can make, it changes how you relate in relationships, friendships, and even with yourself. And it always begins the same way: curiosity about others, and first, about yourself. Where do you rush when you should slow down? Where do you withdraw when presence is required? Where do you solve when someone simply needs to be heard? Those are the questions worth sitting with. We live in a culture that teaches attraction as performance. Say this, do that, play this role. And performance can hold attention for a moment. But what we're talking about is something else entirely: a connection that doesn't require maintenance because it's built on something real. The kind where you don't have to constantly say the perfect thing because your presence has already communicated what matters. When a woman who has been emotionally running on empty begins reaching out in the quiet ways we described, testing, moving closer, risking vulnerability, she isn't being irrational. She's being human. She's asking without words whether you can be trusted with the weight of another person, whether you can be present without being pushy, warm without being overwhelming, perceptive enough to hear the thing beneath the thing, the fear, the longing, the hope beneath layers of self-protection. And if you can do that, if you can show up with attunement, grounded warmth, and the capacity to hold what she offers without rushing to fix or possess it, you won't have to chase her. She'll stop running. Not because you executed perfectly, but because you gave her something rare, the experience of being fully herself, and that being enough. That's the real foundation of attraction. That's what desire follows: not performance, not strategy, presence. Be that person first for yourself, and let what's meant to align with you align. If this resonated, if you found yourself reflecting somewhere along the way, share which of the three triggers stood out most to you. And stay in conversations that push you toward becoming more grounded, more perceptive, and more real. Because that's the work, and it's worth it.